the robot voice says we're recording.
Oh.
Brilliant. Let's get started.
Okay, yeah, hi. As you can tell by the picture there, I'm Ben. I've been in software development since about 2005. I've been a Scrum Master in time for about 5 years and been contracted for 3 years. And I will say that if you like the word you're going to hear a lot of it in this upcoming presentation.
Brilliant. Ben also, by the way, forgot to mention his shirt has been chosen to nicely clash with the font of his name. So one of his skills. I'm Ashley. As Mike's already said, I'm the software engineering lead. Used to work at Elsevier, but I escaped. And I'm accompanied also by Slide Lady, who came with the slide deck, and we just didn't have the heart to take her off. Did we ever find out her actual name?
Yeah, she is Wendy Writer, apparently.
Wendy Writer. Oh yes, she's mentioned lower down in the slide deck. Yeah. So before we start, let's cover this.
Yeah, okay, so the Prime Directive. And with this project, we believed that everybody was doing their best. At times difficulties arose because we didn't understand what people wanted necessarily, or their motivations and drivers, and we didn't, they didn't understand how we operated, which did cause some conflict. But we believed at every point that they were trying their best, and despite the difficulties, we would try to get to us by showing our best and showing that we were actually on their side. We were working with them, not against them. It just took a while to get through.
And it's quite important because we're going to be quite open about things, but we want to make the Prime Directive really clear at every stage. We respect how other people were, and this leads us to the subprime directive, should I say, something that advises you not to rest on your laurels, which is just because we did something well last time doesn't mean we're going to do it well next time. In fact, whilst we were putting this presentation together, we realized that some of the practices that had worked very well for us in this previous project, we've kind of forgotten to do quite in the way that works in this next project that we're in. And so it's very, very important, I think, to constantly take stock with humility at what you have done and see how it can be applied next time. So what we're going to do is try and give you a whistle-stop tour of things from a recent project, a project that will have some highs and lows as we talk it through. And it's just me a catalogue of events, observations of things that happened. We're going to try and include some homespun wisdom along the way, if we can think of some. Just kind of give you a tour of the whole thing. It may be interrupted by my children shouting in other rooms of the house. Don't worry about that. And we do invite questions and observations later on. So please, we're presenting this as it happened to us. I'm sure you'll have some questions or want to know more about things. So do take notes. And undoubtedly, you're going to want to know kind of why did we do it one way, or how did this thing work, or what if you'd done that other thing. And obviously, we'll try and talk about those things openly as we get to the question section. So to put things in context, we're rewinding to about October of last year. We just finished the last in a sequence of projects for our technical product manager, who's kind of halfway a product owner, halfway a project manager. And they were happy with our work, lots of trust, lots of happiness around the place. And there was this urgent project that we were recommended to come and help with. And we were going to get a briefing from the other technical project manager who works with this particular individual about our next 12-week-long challenge, because that was the time available. It had started as 13 weeks, but we'd lost a week to just, who knows, not realizing how big a deal it was about to be from the initial request. So what was the request? Well, the project is that CentOS is going out of support. So can you just drop Elasticsearch into the cloud for us? Nobody likes that request. What exactly is this? Is it a DevOps task? I mean, we can do DevOps, that's not a problem. So we started asking questions, getting information back. Apparently they had 2 terabytes of data, and maybe we had to do some image searching, like image recognition. There might be hundreds of users according to the monitoring. We'll come back to how good monitoring is later. But we only really know of 13, and we're not quite sure who they are. But we know what we want you to do. We want you to make a Spring Boot service that will run in a container near an Elasticsearch. We'll build a UI for it later, but it will ultimately support the thing we're going to have to turn off for CentOS. And we think it would be a good idea if you could run Elasticsearch in S3. And what is S3 exactly? That was our request. It's a trap, guys. It's a trap.
Sorry, can you hear me okay? My internet's gone a bit funny. I can no longer see pictures, so I'm just hoping I'm talking at the right point. Okay, so I mean, if you think about the problem that we were faced with, it had a bit of the XY problem about it. I don't know if you're familiar with, but if you cast your mind back to sort of last summer, and you can imagine a senior developer somewhere in the track and trace program being asked the question, how do you get more than 16,384 columns on an Excel spreadsheet? And this is what we felt like. We're being asked something, but we don't understand the context of why we're being asked it. We don't understand the X, we're just being given the Y. Another problem with this was we didn't know when we'd be finished with the project. We didn't know what done looked like. We could migrate the data, but people weren't going to check it until a later phase. So that could come back and bite us. Understanding the motivations for wanting to move. It was an old operating system, which ultimately would throw up a red flag on a security review somewhere. It was also part of a much bigger project plan. So there was possibly some other integrations we would have to fit in with that weren't disclosed straight away. And then what happens when we move the data? There's what depends on that data now. If we move data from A to B, you're going to leave a data size hole in A, and who consumes it, who writes data there? There must be something else using it. Data doesn't just exist without context. And again, with this type of problem, we felt that at best we would deliver something suboptimal, but at worst we could be really destructive and break a lot of existing business process. So we did what we did best, and we started asking some questions. And asking questions is a good thing. The problem is we probably started asking questions a bit too much, and we were asking questions and proposing different solutions and different ways of dealing with what we saw as being the problem. But we were doing it to a technical project manager who hadn't built the trust up with yet, and we didn't quite have the rapport. So they probably misinterpreted what we were asking them. Instead of being the team that can just do stuff, it looked like we were being difficult, and we were just saying no. This TPM technical project manager is used to dealing with legacy projects where there was a back-end team, there was a front-end team. It was all quite clearly divided up. But we were a full stack team, so they weren't quite used to the questions we were asking, and we weren't used to having such a constraint put on us. And ultimately, the different.
What Ben is trying to say is that I shot my mouth off in a meeting and it lost a lot of trust. But it was only one meeting, and we won them back round. But what questions was I asking? I was asking things like, if you don't have a UI, how do we know if the back end works? Who's going to build the UI? To which they said they didn't have the budget. Well, should we build the UI? They said, to which they replied, well, will you have time? To which I said, well, if we build less of the back end, we can build some of the UI, and then you'll have a working system. To which we weren't saying yes to the thing they were asking, and I did rather assume that we could have conversations like that from the place that we were.
Yeah, it got to a point where we had to change our approach and saying, what if we did this? What if we did that? To being the team that says, yes, okay, we'll do that, and we can do this, that, and the other. And rather than just being rather than being difficult, we became like the easy team where you could just ask us and we'll do it.
Yes, but first of all, we had the very honest conversation about setting expectations, and it sounded a bit too much like no. So, given that I spoiled things by being frank at the beginning, and bear in mind it was one meeting, our director had a chat with the TPM and said, listen, they are trying to help, but they're trying to help in a way you're not accustomed to. Let's see where it can go. We should probably talk about the importance of building trust, particularly in a new situation, because it was something which we had been doing in previous projects, but forgotten to do in this one. So how do you build trust with somebody who doesn't know you from Adam? So one of our principles was to try to consistently under-promise and over-deliver. We wanted to demonstrate as quickly as possible that we could make regular incremental progress because people will believe it if they see it. We realized that we were asking our TPM to be more open-minded about how we could achieve what we thought their goal was, but not necessarily the way they thought. So we had to demonstrate that we were also open-minded as to how this would go and put them more in the driving seat. Fundamentally, we needed to build rapport with our new collaborators. And that meant we needed to very quickly develop a shared language. That meant we had to learn the problem domain language, so we were talking in their terms. But it also meant that some of the things that they didn't understand about our world, like what is S3, we explained it and demonstrated that we were on the case and that we were very much connected and involved. Part of what was evident to us, but actually wasn't evident from that first meeting, was how much we were trying to make a commitment to the success of the project as opposed to our success versus the success of somebody else. So what did we agree to do? Fundamentally, we'd been asked to make a bit of a thing, and we wanted to take a shift from make that component to solve the problem. So we took a full stack approach. We had some front end guys doing Vue.js, some back end guys doing, well, we were all doing all of it, but we had a front end specialist helping us do the Vue.js and also all the backend stuff. We decided, although it was a migration of some existing code base that ran in one place to a new place, that we were going to take a modern rebuild approach, saving one or two bits and bobs from the old code, but largely starting over because we were making less of the system than originally. We were going to underbuild our system. We're going to oversimplify an MVP. In other words, it's not that we're going to say, here is the smallest system that does everything the old one does. We were going to make a toy version of it. This is the Fisher-Price version of a search, an image search. You'll start with that, and then we'll add useful features on top once we've got something that can survive the grand switch off of the old system. And the idea is kind of stick a little bit off the top of each thing you need to have an enterprise grade system, rather than make big, deep replicas of the existing features. And obviously everything that we did was going to be delivered end to end, from keyboard to environment at full quality. And our goal would be to continuously focus on how do we solve the business problem, not how do we make that box from that piece of the architecture. That's what we agreed to do, and they agreed to let us try, and obviously we built trust by doing it as we went along. But there was something that we particularly wanted to avoid, because we could have just said, yeah, okay, we'll make you a Spring Boot service, and we'll copy that data into that instance over there in AWS. What we felt we'd been given was not a project so much as a meatball, a little morsel of a bigger system that was kind of not really a thing in its own right. And so I've coined a term, which is meatballs architecture, which is where your software is divided up into morsels, joined up by spaghetti code, presumably. And we felt that was an anti-pattern, and we didn't want to start with that as a thing. So let's talk about process and how we actually went about delivering this.
Okay, so we felt that when the initial request came in, it wasn't really sort of, let's say, in the spirit of Agile, of evoking an Agile team. So we're going to tell you how we went about and did our things, and compare contrast with your own Agile processes. But this is a story about how we rolled for that project. So the first thing we want to talk about is just the team, having a self-organizing team. It's often talked about, but this is what it meant for us. The most important thing about a self-organizing team is the quiz on Thursdays. Secondary to that, there was a great camaraderie in the team. There was high trust within the team, and our direct management would trust us enough to just get on and do the job. It felt like a high-performing team as well, because there was a great focus on working toward a goal rather than just doing a task or doing a story. We didn't let stories get in the way of meeting goals, because that was our primary measure of progress, really. We also had a number of changes in the team, some new interns coming in and a couple of people leaving partway through. But the team was able to flex to the personnel changes, and it hadn't disrupted the actual flow of work we were doing and the quality we were delivering at. So we look actually at the process practices and what we did on the slide that you'll see. There'll be the actual breakdown of what a week looked like. Within the team, our stories were probably closer to technical tasks, which helped our remote working a lot better because it was divvied up a lot smaller. The actual product stories themselves, which would come from the product managers and the expert users, we kind of matched them together to make sure that our technical tasks were marrying up with proper use cases outside the process. A key thing as well is zero estimates. That's something, I know it's at the top of the slide there. We deliberately decided to go for a right size story rather than trying to have variable size stories and try and estimate them. And again, that was something we just learned through remote working rather than anything else. Prior to lockdown, we were sort of doing the story point estimates. It just became easier to manage it like this at home. So another few things we did, we pretty much ditched the definition of ready. We felt we didn't need that, and it just at the time felt like another reason to say no to the product owner. It's better obviously to be able to build something, show it, repeat, get feedback. Is this right? Is this right? Rather than spend the time doing the design, because there was a bit of a dark cloud over the requirements anyway. They were kind of emerging all the time, so we didn't have a clear vision on them to start. Definition of done though was really important to us. It was a way of making sure that everybody within the team was working to the same standards, so that we'd be sure when we picked up each other's work that it was in a suitable state. But most importantly, definition of done is really important for our product manager and stakeholders, that when we said we were going to do something and deliver it to an environment with this level of quality, we delivered that. We also had a quiz on Thursdays as well.
Most importantly,
yes. There'll be questions on this later. So what we then developed out of this was called the 6 O's of success. It's the one size fits all, where we had one iteration, which was 1 week long, where one story is one story point and can be completed in 1 day to get towards one goal. I'm actually making that up. I just love the sound of it.
6 O's.
The 6 O's of success. Actually, the real trick here was we taught the team to KISS, which is, if you don't know, it's keep it simple, stupid. It was nothing more than that. And we only just did enough process or methodology to keep us going, to do what was needed. And we wouldn't bring anything else until we saw we actually needed to do more control. We worked like faster cycles in order that we could get some working software in front of our project manager to build a trust and actually work out if this is what they wanted now. For the team as well, although there was a bit of resistance to going from a 2 week to a 1 week cycle, it actually led to a few benefits with shorter online meetings for us, because who doesn't love a short online meeting at home where it's surrounded with kids and stuff. It removed the burden of estimation, which sometimes found difficult to do online. And people that were now working apart in separate environments, they couldn't get lost too long on tickets as well. We kind of knew that a ticket would only be, yes, Peter, we decided the O, one size fits all is the title. But we decided that people couldn't get lost for too long on any particular task. So we'd never spend time, going down rabbit holes. We solved it quite quickly. Trick is though, without estimates, is how do you track progress with zero estimates? Well, going back to basics, the primary measure of progress is working software, not story points. And we wanted to ensure that we worked in the fastest way to get working software, because estimates are a tool, but they don't actually change the speed of delivery. We also didn't know the requirements, as I mentioned earlier, before they emerged, so we couldn't really estimate a fat lot to be of any use. And then we found that data is far better than estimates anyway. I mean, during lockdown one, I'll share something with you. I used a technique to understand a real world problem that was happening in our house at the time. There was a bit of a panic on, people were panic buying. And what we should see here is a graph of toilet roll usage over time. I had to use data to work out, did we need to keep buying toilet roll or were we good? And by capturing the data and extrapolating upon our usage, I kind of figured that we were going to be okay with until about the end of May with the stockpile we had. And I felt much more confidence in this than any estimates the people in the household were going to give me about their toilet roll usage. But back to the actual project in hand, we had 2 goals we were trying to work towards. The first was migrate some data. Now, we didn't really need to estimate this. This was going to be like a DevOps task. Most of this task is going to be elapsed time. You put in a request somewhere, 2 weeks later, somebody with an SLA will give you permission to do stuff. It was trivial. It was more get the task in the right order, it'll be done. With the business continuity side of things, actually making a working system someone can use, it's a different ballgame. We had a hard deadline, and again, the estimates didn't matter here because that deadline was not going to move. So we had to do the best we could to get a working MVP out as quickly as possible, descope the risk from the project by doing that. And then if we had spare time left over was to move on to adding additional features. Working in GE, they have, they're quite, I say quite strict. There's a lot of gates to go through, particularly security wise. So our MVP also had to be production-like as possible, to satisfy all the pen tests, compliance needs, as well as the organization. So there was a lot of onus on us to deliver something that maybe was lighter on functions, on features than the users were initially used to, but was absolutely of a production-like top quality piece of software. Really, to track progress though, we had stuff within the team about like monitoring. We could monitor tickets through our Rally software, but also it was our weekly reviews with the users were the primary source of, you know, tracking our progress. If we could do a review with an end user and show them something working each week, we knew we were making good progress. And by cross-referencing what we were doing in the team with their use cases, we could actually show them how we were progressing. And what we kept as well as on the side is the demo diary. So for iteration 1, we'd do the demo, we'd show them there. We would do the demo, we'd actually show them what we'd done from their point of view, so they'd understand the use case we were satisfying. But we'd also keep a sort of pictorial representation of the system. We'd keep something simple like a 5-box diagram, and we'd show them how something was growing. So a 5-box diagram was just essentially like a diagram in about 5 boxes to explain a system. Any more than that would probably get too complicated. So it was just easy to read. So by week 2, for example, we could then show them another use case and show them from a technical point of view how the system was growing all the time. And by week 3, we would show this ever expanding system that shows how these nebulous parts of development were growing into the use cases they wanted, the things they were seeing. And that further that diagram got, it was showing them the closer we were to achieving their goals. Does that cover it?
I think that covers it nicely.
Sorry.
So it's a given that we felt we couldn't just rebuild every last feature of the system we were replacing in the time available, and that obviously we were extending our brief to cover things that nobody was building, so there would be some sort of whole system in place. And Ben talked about requirements shifting, which essentially was that we weren't necessarily sure whether all of the areas of the architecture were going to be covered by this drop dead date, or whether we were going to be sort of shifting sideways to make other services. But let's just rewind a moment and say, well, we had to work on an entirely new code base, and for a new corner of the organization and a new particular VPC. So it's how do projects start? And our experience was that, yeah, here we go again. We're starting in treacle. It's going to be slow at the beginning. So let's talk about, you know, the things that seem to happen when you bootstrap a project. We needed to tool up for success, which essentially meant that we needed to work out the best ways of doing things in this new environment, because time invested setting ourselves up to deliver rapidly would pay off. And we know it did, because we put the few days into doing this that it took, and one of our colleagues in the other pod who were also working on this project kind of didn't. And their keyboard to trying test time was about 20 minutes, whereas ours was seconds and maybe 5 minutes for deployment or something. So it was really critical for us to do that. In terms of deployments, we had to do continuous deployment. We wanted to do it, but we had to do it their way, a new way to us, the way that this particular target area of the business worked, which meant we had to tackle the fearsome DevOps scripts. And don't get me wrong, DevOps is a brilliant thing. We as a full stack team, we absolutely wanted to do it. But we realized that the way that we worked, of taking responsibility for our own DevOps, and the way that other parts of the organization worked, where kind of the developers threw some code at the DevOps team and said, "Here, script that up," seemed to be quite different to each other. And it seems that, you know, notwithstanding the Prime Directorate, that everyone was doing their absolute best. If the target of a DevOps activity is just do DevOps, it can sort of be optimized for somewhere that's neither dev nor ops. and there's this thing that does something that falls between two stools. And so we had to work out exactly how to make the scripts that we were inheriting work for us. And then, as good, kind citizens, we humbly contributed our tweaks back, which was a positive outcome of taking that more full stack mentality into an area which had been a little bit more compartmentalized. Fundamentally, when you're starting a project, you have to work backwards from what are all the things that you need to have nothing, and get that all in place. There's a classic sprint zero. And so the initial week or so, we were tackling all those things. We also encountered a problem I call the elbow room problem, which is that if your code base is really small, it's actually quite hard to get a team of multiple people to contribute to it, because there's no surface area for them to work in. Now, we did use techniques like pairing and mobbing in order to make good use of the minds of multiple people and get them all into it. But there's still a limit as to how much you can achieve when your current surface area of your software is very, very small. So we're starting from scratch. One of the things that we'd encountered in a previous project before, and we started to encounter here, is what we call the story trains, which is that we'll have, say, a refinement session saying what are all the things we need to do. We come up with some small stories or tasks. We'd have a planning session and bring them into the sprint. And then we go, all those 12 stories, each one depends on the previous one. How can we actually proceed? Because we are losing some of the concurrency that we get for people working as part of a larger team. And we really wanted to find out ways to spot that in our early discussions. So we abused plant UML, and I recommend you have a crack at this as well. Here's a really simplified version of what that looks like. In the boxes are essentially areas. In this case, we actually were mapping out the columns of a simple Kanban board to do an in progress columns. And what we have here is a solid line representing, I can't start this thing until that one's done. And the dotted line meaning, can't really finish this thing until that one's done. And certainly with some of the security constraints that we had, where we wanted to put the necessary controls in place, there were various things that started to depend on each other, that you couldn't make this thing talk to that thing until things had been sorted out correctly. And so mapping out those story trains and then trying to slightly spread our footprint across other functional areas so that we wouldn't all get in each other's way was something that happened early in the project. And once we were through it, of course, there was space for everyone to get going. G's a large organization, so faces a certain amount of preventing itself doing things, which meant we had to identify as many dependencies as possible up front. Couldn't have Elasticsearch in the cloud until somebody had worked out how to give us permissions to create an instance of Elasticsearch, which involved quite a lot of digging. One of the chaps on the call was involved in a lot of that digging. We could, of course, develop against Elasticsearch using Docker and other non-deployed versions of it, but we still had to try and solve this problem early on. We had to generally solve various permissions things and compliance issues as well, all of which were there to get us through the reason why all our hard work would come to nothing if we met those things late on. So we tried to head them off early on in the project. So once we got going, a few weeks in, we were trying to use this idea of showing regular incremental progress to really gain the trust of this wary TPM that we weren't going to actually deliver anything on time. So the way we did that was by delivering what we hope were great demos. And I don't know how many of you have come across great demos of concept. I'd like to demonstrate it to you because it's one of the most useful techniques that we've used across projects. So the best way to demonstrate to you what a great demo is to give you a terrible demo and then show you how that would work if we did a great demo. So I'm now going to attempt to demonstrate Google to you. This tab, by the way, is not what you think it is. I'm now going to try and demonstrate Google to you whilst Ben heckles, and I'm going to do it as badly as possible. Imagine I'm going to do it in the style of my 6-year-old giving me one of his never-ending lectures about dinosaurs. I'm going to, most people forget at the start of a demo to explain what the use case is, but in this case, the use case is I'm going to try to find a quote by Thomas Edison, the one about failing. That's how I'm going to demonstrate the search engine. Of course, Thomas Edison is one of the founding fathers of GE, who we currently work for, the man who invented the light bulb, as I'm sure you know, and is
actually, please.
featured in a recent episode of Doctor Who. And okay, I'll get on with it. So this is Google, and it helps us search the internet. And it uses an algorithm called PageRank, which, or at least it used to, where the pages that link to other pages, they have some sort of weighting, and then the ratio of
Very interesting.
links.
Actually. Can you just get on with it, please?
Fine, I'll get on with it. So this is the web browser we're going to use for the test. The web browser is a application which we use to connect to the internet, upon which a search engine would normally be based. And the web browser has a feature where we can enter in the address, and it has buttons that we can press that allow us to well, this one seems to scroll when you touch it, which is interesting, and it allows us to do a search.
Demo, please, Ashley.
Sure. Anyway, Google is the search engine, and you can see there's various options around the screen. Picture of me in the top corner, and there's this box in the middle, and I'll type Edison into it, and then it does come up with a wrong thing here. It hasn't yet found the quote, but I think you can see by this stage I've covered lots of stuff that's interesting to me, or at least moderately, but I haven't really given you a sense of wonder at searches and at the results of what the people who've just made Google have achieved. So let's just go back a step. So the objective of a great demo is not to do that thing the developers do where you explain the nerdy stuff. It's to show them the result as quickly as you possibly can. You have to set an expectation. So there's loads of stuff on the internet about Edison. Can we find that famous quote of his? Thomas Edison quote about failing. And here it is. That's the one. So we found it among all the pages on the internet. That version of the demo took the time it takes to operate the software. And despite the fact there's loads of stuff that you might think of as useful background information, actually, this is much more impactful. So hopefully I know I've given you a very boring counterexample. Let's talk about great demo in principle. There's a book about it, which I'd recommend. If you ever get back into the Elsevier office in Oxford, I left a few copies of this around before I left. And effectively, a great demo is a magic trick. You say, oh, see this ordinary thing, boom, look, I've made something appear. It has immediate impact. It's very much the opposite of this, explain the detail, and anyone can do it. You just need to prepare and rehearse. And so we had a great result with the most junior member of our team doing quite a complex demo in one of our sessions because they spent the time to learn the script. It is the difference between the news headlines and some shaggy dog story that you're telling down the pub. In terms of how you set up a demo session, we found it's really useful to say maximum of 30 minutes for demos, a couple of minutes of feature. And in this particular project, what we actually did was took the goal of the previous sprint and tried to find a single walkthrough of the software that was as punchy as that Google demo, if at all possible, that showed everything we'd achieved since last time. Just one visual makes it work. And that's the point. Seeing is believing. You do some stuff, you summarize at the end, we set an expectation for next time, using illustrations that people can really grasp. And in fact, one good example was we said, right, we've done searching for text. Next time, we're going to show you images, and they're going to be pictures of penguins. Why? Because everyone loves penguins. It's a nice visual thing, bit of fun whilst we're building the software. And then that gave people the sense of progress, very much like that diagram we saw earlier. And the objective of a demo is to make people see and feel your progress as quickly as possible. Right.
Okay.
So then, after all this demoing to a TPM, after we got something up and running with pictures of penguins on, it was time for us to meet this guy.
Yes, I mean, we were very, very fortunate that after this pool of hundreds of users and then the 13 they actually managed to identify, there was one person who was an expert end user who managed the team of people that were using the system, and we got him on board. So this with this chap, we gave him the story so far demo, which is a real thing, which is where we take the actual whole system we've done so far, and we showed it to him. Luckily, it was they're all quite quick demos as well, but it makes the difference between showing somebody the gap between an iteration and the whole thing. So we showed him that, and what we found was that he was so happy to compromise, and he revealed, with us about the system we're building, and he was really knowledgeable about how they actually use the system and what bits they could live with and what bits they could live without. More importantly, we kind of realized that he was so on board with us because prior to the project starting, I think his expectation was set that he'd be accessing his images using a CLI until a later UI phase was done. So he was really happy to help. It was the first major piece of good fortune, and it helped shape the features that we built first for this project.
And this is where something which I had sort of provocatively set up at the beginning paid off in a way I wasn't expecting. We had said at the beginning, we're making a toy version of the system. We're going to underbuild it like anything. So, for example, there was somewhere where we're supposed to show a page with all of the data from the metadata rendered in nice fields. We said, well, we've got it in JSON format. We'll just bung that on the screen. It's just a placeholder, we said to the guy. Don't be spooked. And he went, yeah, it's all right. I understand that, Jason. That's fine. So we didn't need to spend a few days kind of, or however long it's going to take, rendering the form nicely and all the flexible fields to make it work. He liked the JSON. The thing that we thought was below expectations met his expectations. We said, in terms of downloads, downloading images from this is going to be a bit slow. It may only work in some browsers. He said, fine, just tell me which browser to use. We had a very complicated faceted search capability that was harnessing Elasticsearch's aggregations that we were excited to build, but we stopped ourselves from building too soon so we could make sure we could focus on completeness and quality and other things around it. And so when we demoed it to him without it, we said, and of course, you're probably going to need that faceted search. And his answer was, well, actually, I don't, because I only use it because people keep misspelling the airline Emirates. If you could just make it so I could find the misspellings with my search for the word Emirates, I wouldn't need the facets. So underbuilding really, really paid off. I mean, it might suggest that the previous system had been overbuilt, but the point was that by demonstrating something that was working with this particular user who was a gift, we were actually able to get away with building a lot less because he could understand practically that the gap from what we'd made to what he needed was maybe smaller than it looked like on paper. But that wasn't the only place where there was a gap in this project. So we also had to integrate our search backend with the ingestion process that was happening, made by another part of the team. And this was the team based in India. And so we're fighting a problem when you're trying to integrate software between teams, potentially, particularly a team that you don't know very well. And if you think about how integrations between teams usually happen in large organizations, you exchange documents, you exchange specifications, you try and build a contract. Now, contracts are fine between APIs, but between people, it's not very agile. And, we preferred individuals and interactions over heavy processes. We preferred customer collaboration over contracts. And so we decided to try and fight Conway's law's fences. The idea of Conway's law is that you've got a system in a certain structure, a company in a certain structure, your systems will kind of have barriers between them in a similar structure. So how do you actually avoid that? Particularly if we're making the API they're calling, how do we avoid, well, it works for me. My API works, it must be you. But first of all, we wrote a client SDK. And in fact, not only that, we ate our own dog food and used the client SDK. We load tested and we migrated the data into the target database through our own API, through our own client SDK. So we felt the pain of trying to use our own software. When it came to integrating the two systems together, we paired with them. We didn't say, there you go and use that. I think I woke up early in the morning to be on Indian time and spent a few hours with the team. If I didn't, we certainly started out to spend lots of time together. And whilst doing that, we realized the pain they'd felt by not really tooling up at the beginning of the project, because their builds didn't really quite work and they didn't really have the ability to get artifacts in and also some other stuff that fundamentally I was able to help them with as a friend rather than sit on the sidelines wondering why things are taking time. Effectively walked a mile in the shoes of the other team. Got to the stage where those spooky DevOps scripts that they'd outsourced to somebody else for them that they couldn't drive, we helped them understand what was going on so that they could configure their system to correctly have all the URLs to talk to ours and all that good stuff. Because fundamentally, we try to have the approach that there's only one success. It's not that we're successful in our own right. The success is that of the whole project, including external teams. And when it came to trying to agree how things should be, where there's always a communication gap because you're saying the same things with different words or different things with the same words, we frequently use the phrase like this in our communication. Here, look, here's a picture of what I think I mean. Is that what you mean? And that worked really, really well for us. And this led us then to about 10 weeks in, was it? Or maybe 9 weeks in, trying to get completeness into place in favor of more features. Because we were a guest on this project, we were in there to solve a problem. And what we wanted to do was have a clean handover. And that involves anything at all that somebody might encounter in the real world after we've walked away. So as it happens, and we're doing this on the project right now, we road tested the backup and restore, because who wants to test if their backup works or if their lightboat works when the ship is sinking? So we made sure that there was a practical way of doing administrative tasks on this system, imagining the worst case for the support team. We made sure there was a support handover and strong documentation for the support team, because this wasn't a case of you build it, you run it. We were handing it over to someone. We met whatever standards that the team needed to throw at us. And a good tip, by the way, if you want your software to start really slowly, stick New Relic in to monitor it. It's a very good way to make it boot up at about 5 minutes. We tackled all the problems that were necessary to make that work as well as possible. The key thing for us, and this is a useful thing that we have as a contract team anyway, is not to grow a tail. So there's an alumnus of Elsevier called Kevin Noel, who came up with the term of growing a tail. And, you know, the Elsevier folks on the call will know the average lifespan at Elsevier is about 15 years of tenure at the place. And during that time, you touch so many different systems, it's quite possible you end up responsible for everything you've ever been near, because you're there for the long haul and you sort of, the further you walk forward, the more stuff tails behind you. And yet here, what we were looking for was something that was so wrapped up, done and dusted, that it didn't give us a sort of an ongoing responsibility to kind of come back in and sort stuff out that we'd only half done. And this led to another development. We discovered a thing I like to call README-driven development, in that if you spend time trying to document how to do a difficult thing for your support team, it's a feedback loop that makes you think of a better way to do it. A good example was I was trying to answer the question in the support documents of how would I know why a particular user was having access errors to the images. And so I said, well, I have to look in the logs. Okay, well, what are we auditing so that you could find that out in the logs? And it led me to a feedback loop to make the logs easier to mine, so that the tools that they have to search for log messages would have the user ID in it in the right way so they could easily find it out. So that feedback loop that developers who have to document their own stuff make it better was certainly in force here as well. So we documented things up, we finished off our features, and then
we finished the product, and I think we became a footnote on a newsletter somewhere, you know. And it really is the case that if you can finish a project with no drama, you know, and enable the business to just carry on doing what it does, then for us that was a success. How we did it, we essentially just broke down the work for the team, whilst tying everything back to the business and compliance needs. So everybody had a good view of what they were doing. Partway through, we found out that there was a gap in the whole overall project. So we had to build another image service to deal with the actual data that accompanied the Elasticsearch data. The initial start of the project was CentOS, but we barely spoke about it after that. It became a project about business continuity and about aircraft maintenance. So it turned the problem on its head a bit. And by building the way we did, thanks to Ashley and team, really, it turns out there were lots of other potential uses for what was built as well. It could potentially be like an image lake, a data lake for all the images. And we're also able to give demos to other teams about how we achieve like the continuous integration and how we did the test automation, which was something that other teams have struggled with. More importantly, though, we did manage to migrate the metadata from an on-prem server into the cloud. Let's not forget that. You know. And so we're going to leave you really with, please know this final slide. This is, so was it Agile? Initially, the request came in, and it seemed to be the sort of project that people who like to do Agile things would probably have run away from. We were pretty much on that. We were pretty much there. As we approached it, I mean, we tried to go as fast as possible. We had a team that was trusted to get the job done, and they functioned really well. We realized as the project grew as well that success criteria was growing. It was a DevOps project, became a UI project that then became a whole integration project. So we had to achieve all those things to get success. And as Ashley mentioned as well, we didn't build things that weren't mandated. We waited until they were mandated, and that saved us from over-engineering something that just wasn't required. And finally, getting user feedback. Our iteration length was deliberately short, so we could do something quickly and do that like this. You want this, and get feedback on it straight away, particularly in a place where our requirements are emerging all the time. So I'm going to leave you 2 questions. The first question is, when's the quiz? And the second is, what did you make of it? Thank you.
So there we are. Mike, how do you want to facilitate? Oh, thank you.
Right. Well, I would say that I think the easiest way to do it is if anyone's got a question, could you type it in the chat, and then we'll sort of handle the questions and points via the chat, and then we'll invite you to read your question out. How's that sound? Sounds like a plan. Any questions? So Peter just said his first question, which started really near the beginning of this, was Ashley likes to sing in his spare time, ? So do you like to sing in your spare time, Ashley? Because you were there with a guitar.
I am, among other things, a stand-up comedian. Although since it's been over a year since my last gig, that's hard thing to claim. The only thing I can say is there's a reason I didn't Google myself, but feel free to go and look up my YouTube channel and find all sorts of nonsense with me singing or otherwise.
Brilliant. Okay, so we have got a real question from John Hunt on about support. John, would you like to step forward and ask the guys the question?
Oh, cool. Yeah, I was just wondering about the sort of end of the project when you handed it over into support and stuff like that. I mean, was it continuity in the same team, or did you have to sort of chuck it over the fence or whatever? Ways about that.
So we have a modus operandi within GE as to how we solve that problem. Let's stop sharing the screen, because then it's a little bit more friendly. There are a few projects we've run where we've then handed over to a support team at the end. And by a support team, I don't really mean a dev function, I mean an operational support team. Any further dev would fall back to somebody closer to us. And it's worth pointing out on this project, no one's been in touch. We assume they're using it, but it seems like it does actually work because they're very quiet. So the key thing, again, is the approach we've taken is to look at it from the other team's point of view rather than our own. So rather than saying, there you go, we start out with these projects by having an initial session to ask them what they need to know. Ask them what questions must be answered by the support documentation, what questions must be answered by the monitoring dashboards, what are their concerns about what might land in their space. And to be fair, a lot of these projects that we've worked on have been migration projects, so they have a pre-existing expectation for what it's like to look after the system. But I think it's really good. Fundamental thing number one is go and ask them, don't go and tell them. That's a very good way to achieve buy-in and to understand some hidden requirements and all that good stuff. All I can say about the way we've written support documentation so far, the only feedback we've had is there is an adjective that the consumers of that documentation seem to use, which is the word trusty. Well, yeah, we went to the trusty website and we really have tried very hard. And this is, I think, this isn't us talking about our own practices so much as getting the culture of GE, which is very engineering manual heavy. We tried very hard to really answer the question of what should you do if this goes wrong? How could it possibly go wrong, even in ways that are silly? And what must the mitigations be? And we've tried to answer that long before it really happens. And that, I think, has given us a more rounded view of the engineering, and it's made us more humble in the face of the support team, who ultimately have to, keep the fires burning. We've not always got that right. There's one product where the support team turned down some of the alarms because it was ringing all the time, and therefore missed some problems. And then we spent some time with them to deep dive and to understand how do we tune this so it works better in one of the other projects. But the point is that the relationship starts on a very good footing, which is partnership and high engineering quality. Does that answer your question, John?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Cheers, Ashley.
Got another question from Jan Mao. Do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Is it the question about?
It's I can read it. Yeah, how to define stories that can be finished in one day. Who can define them? How did you manage that?
Okay, so first off, let's be clear. I mean, there's a the word stories. I think we're using, and essentially a lot of the time we mean some kind of task or some kind of work item. I think it's just the software we use. Maybe just calls things stories. We're so used to using the word stories, they're not actually what one see as a classical user story. There's a degree of quality we expect in them that we don't have, like do the dev, do a peer review, do a QA. They're not split like that. They're just really small items of work that was like, do this small thing, get it, peer review it, test it, done. So that's the way we've been working in the team at this point in time. So that's how we do. So they're not classic stories, but that's how we get the work done in that day time.
It's not always a day though, is it? So sometimes a story will be a quick win that you can do in a couple of hours. Sometimes there'll be a humdinger that kind of drags on a bit. But the average seems to be about a day-ish. And it doesn't follow, by the way, that one story is one pull request either. We particularly where we had those interlaced stories where something couldn't really couldn't really get started until something else was going a bit or couldn't finish, whatever else. We would recommend to the team wherever possible to do smaller micro PRs or micro commits or whatever, to be able to do things in as small in increments as possible, so that you at least are showing progress within a story, or opening up opportunities for integration. The key thing though is that they're right sized. In other words, they're small enough that they're small enough that you can just do them without it dragging on wherever possible, but they're not so small that they're a fragment. We want something that's kind of the size of a cookie, not the size of a crumb, and not the size of a big old cake. It's something that's just fungible, if you like.
I think it's another aspect of this as well is there aren't we don't have business analysts in the team. We don't have, let's say, a big product department breaking things down for us. So we have a lot of technical expertise. So that's kind of how the team goes around digesting the larger pieces into bits that they understand and works for them. So that's also, I think, why we've gone down this route rather than try and go at user-driven user story route where we don't have those skills necessarily to do that successfully.
And I think speaking, really bluntly, I think we've struggled in the past with the fact that the stories that the product owner or TPM thinks about and the stories that are deliverable by a team are really very different creatures. So it's probably fair to say that there is almost a super story at the epic or feature level that the product owner can kind of grasp as that's the goal that they want to achieve. And it may be quite abstract. And then there are lots of technical things that add up to those. But what we're trying to do at all times that stops it being a sort of a chaos is we are trying to keep a working system on the master, that we are trying to continuously make something that is of production quality with a full test pipeline so that everything is near release candidate. And so what that encourages us to do is try and solve real problems, but do it incrementally. And I know that most people on this call understand that that's what Agile tells you to think. So it's not that we not invented this, but the key thing is to keep ourselves honest. And the thing that Ben said about how sometimes the story hides the thing you're trying to do a little bit. You know, you've got a story that says something, but you can see that it has a slight shadow around it, which is the real thing you're supposed to achieve. As long as the team is motivated to understand the goal, they'll solve the problem within the nearest relevant story. But the fact that stories are meant to be small is a good reason to say, okay, well, that's an increment because we're going to come back and do more in a bit. It's a bit of a fudged answer, but hopefully that gives you a flavor of what it's like. And also it's worth pointing out that the team itself determines what the stories are in 2 sessions. One where we do discussion about what we must therefore need to do in the next week or 2. And that generates some of our stories. And then in planning, we say, okay, what we actually going to do from this week until the end of the iteration, and that's where we then lock those things down and commit to them.
And you were therefore, so it kind of answers the question I was coming really about not doing estimates, because you were therefore defining the stories as a team. You're effectively grooming the stories as a team, so you know what they are. So you don't need and you've already sized them roughly to be small. So you don't need to play the estimating game because you're aligned anyway.
Exactly. I mean, let's be clear. The difficulty is if you were trying to give you a roadmap or a date by which all things are done to a product owner, it's very difficult to do that with this technique. But that said, if your deadline is fixed, then you're trying to get as much into it by that time, which is the mode we encourage the product owner into, and which worked once the product owner realized that what they thought the user needed was not what the actual user needed. The actual user's feedback started to drop scope pretty quickly, actually. Once you're into that, really, you reverse estimation by saying, is this story too big or too small? If it's too big or too small, we'll change it to its component parts, or we'll merge it with something else. But that's your estimation, is does that story feel right sized? And it still fundamentally then gives you a flow rate through your system, and that flow rate becomes approximately consistent or rises at a certain natural rate based on the fact that you get better at stuff. And so that gave Ben enough feedback loops to see how we were doing in the sort of flow of things. And then when it came to day, we just said, right, there's this thing, we know what it means because we talked about it at least twice, or at least once, and let's just work out how to make it happen. Which I'm sure, by the way, I didn't come to this thing thinking, hey, we've invented a new way of developing software. I'm sure most people on this call are doing something similar. Again, we're sharing what worked for us, just really to provoke conversation.
What was that name of the book that you said, Ashley, was so?
It's called Great Demo.
Oh yeah, the Great Demo. Yeah.
And to be fair, it's a book which I think it summarizes it. It's a book written in the Great Demo style, where it says, you want to know X? Here's the answer. Let me now summarize what I've told you. That's fundamentally all Great Demo is. The classic 1, 2, 3 of presentation: set an expectation, reveal it, and then summarize. But it's amazing how hard it is to break out of the explain everything cycle, and how impressive it is when some people all on, with different sort of backgrounds on a demo see the magic trick and understand it all at once in 30 seconds. That's the perfect demo, where they just all get it in one go.
Great, but that like, tell everyone what you're going to do it, and then tell everyone you did it is the kind of recipe.
Yes, the secret to it though is do as little setup as possible. Don't explain anything in the setup. Just make sure they're looking in the right place. I mean, it's like there's nothing up my sleeve, and then woo, there's suddenly you're presenting a card. It's not misdirection, it's the direction. You need to look for this to happen. Boom, it's happened. But of course, there are nuances. So often you'll go back and repeat certain things you've demonstrated and do it a different way. Or somebody will ask a question. I'm glad you asked. Actually, let's answer that. And so, imagine you're demonstrating an image search. People say, well, hang on a minute, can I see the most recent one first? Yes, of course, we'll sort it by date. All of those things, they've already bought into what you're showing them by the time they're asking those questions, rather than you've bored them into a stupor before you get to the interesting bit.
Thank you. Just want to see, talk about if has anyone got any other interesting questions? Any more questions out there for Ashley and Ben, guys, or any anecdotes you'd like to tell us, or anything that chimed with a project you've worked on?
Or even if you think there's something we've done in a funny way, feel free to accuse us of being blind to some better truth, because there are other ways out there, and there may be some things that we didn't tell you about why we chose certain techniques.
How did you handle the sort of pesky technical project manager ongoing in the whole thing? Was it a challenge, or did he sort of start, or she start to buy into it all?
So
on my project management hat.
No,
Yeah.
John, and John, for those people who don't know, John and I worked together a while back, so we're it's a good question. So we've slightly over dramatized how much I annoyed her in the session we had where we asked all the difficult questions. We were very diligently trying to work out the right configuration, the right angle on the project. I think it did require a little bit of politics from somebody else in GE to kind of have that conversation to say, well, in the cold light of day, they are trying to help you. What's the common ground? I think we had a race for like the first 3 weeks to show her we could do something, and we did. I think it was 3 or 4 weeks. We showed her a demo of a search engine, which was the thing that she was missing, and then she became a lot more open to the idea that we might actually be onto something, and that was kind of the rapid prototyping, rapid small increments MVP type of development that really spoke volumes to her, and that first demo was pretty critical. And I think she changed her focus on us a few different ways over the first 6 or 7 weeks, to the point where, rather than being wary about our approach, we were trusted allies. And the reason was because we were constantly saying the same things I said in that building rapport thing. We just want to make this work for you. We're on your side. Whatever you need, we'll try and find a way to say yes, but we're not going to overpromise. And so once you realized that was the motivation and that we were actually achieving something, then the conversation changed from what are you going to do, or how's it going, to more like, okay, what's our next priority? So we just changed the conversation to, we'll give you as much as we can in the time available, but you just need to say, okay, what's more important now? Is it the card view, or is it the images? Is it this, or is it that? And then I think there were a couple of moments where she privately contacted me. I didn't really upset her, but we needed to build a relationship. She privately messaged me to say, I'm just wondering about X to do with the data. And because I'd set out early on in the project to download a snapshot of the production data to analyze it for the migration to the new environment, I was able to answer questions like, how many records are there? What's the diversity of those records? And the moment I started knowing more about the data than she did, and she felt that she could trust me with the success of the project. So it was about really putting the effort in to earn that trust in everything that we tried to do. And don't get me wrong, it was a 12-week project, so how hard can it have been? It wasn't a huge and multi-year endeavor, but I think it still came with a lot of those red flags that so easily can divide people. And I hope it looks like we tried hard to bridge those gaps.
No, I get it. Actually, it's and I think some of the stuff you've shown is really good. I do like that demo stuff. I'm going to try that one out.
Well, it's something I learned at Elsevier, and I think some of the demos we gave at Elsevier were in that category, but I've had a lot of practice since, and it's a good way of doing it. There's a question from Arya.
How do you handle the change in requirements? It's almost like we kind of just did it. We never bit off too much, that it was just, I don't know, it's like, yeah. Because we had short iterations on things, it was never very hard to change focus. You know, that's what we were there to do. That's just the way we operate.
So maybe a change in requirements is, I mean, there's no doubt that we were building features that we didn't expect to build, and that we weren't building features that we thought we were going to end up building. So I think we got lucky to some extent. I think there was a certain amount of design in there, deliberately building small complete things rather than large incomplete things was part of the technique here. So we said, you know, we'll build something that's not really beautiful, but it's definitely complete enough to work. We'll build that quickly, and then that means that we can stop or continue, but it doesn't mean we're sort of half committed to something that we now have more days worth of work to realize that value. So that immediately keeps your workspace pretty clean. I'll be honest with you, some of the end-to-end testing that we did a bit late, and we should have been doing earlier, because that end-to-end testing became a kind of a test debt, but it wasn't much, and we did pay it down soon enough. But if I'm completely honest, there was a tiny amount of end-to-end integration test debt that we could have avoided if we'd taken a different approach. But what actually was happening was we were involved in choosing those requirements, because we were there constantly with the product manager and the architect of the whole project, asking the question, where's that going to come from? Whatever it was. We want to serve images in these boxes. Where are the images? Well, they're in S3. Okay, how are we going to get them to the browser? Well, they're in S3. Yes, but how they're going to get from S3 to somebody's browser are not the people who shouldn't see them. And how can we make sure that, because we haven't told you about it, there's an entitlements piece within this application where, unless you're a super user, you're not really meant to see images of every possible engine that GE knows about, only the ones that you're responsible for. So how do we stop people seeing other people's images? How's that going to happen? Oh, it's in S3. Okay, fine. You need a thing, don't you, to get it between there and the browser. Someone's going to have to make that. You're right. Who? Well, we'll do it, but it'll come at the cost of other things. Fine, please do it. So we were having these kind of grown-up conversations where we're just trying to work out, based on where we are now and based on the next things that must happen in the business process, what must exist. And if the answer was it wasn't covered by somebody else, then we weren't saying, well, that's not my job. We were just saying, do you want it to be our job at the cost of other things that we would otherwise be doing? And I think we did make some very balanced decisions as a group because of that. So that's why the change in requirements wasn't a negative. It was us actually achieving business value rather and protecting business value. And so we were always on board with that.
Thank you. I have one more question also. So just want to know when the requirements are building after the demo or in another meeting?
So I think when you say the requirements are building, so with this project, we felt like we started off when we were having to hunt down and find different people and find out what they needed. Our product manager within the States, our stakeholders, our expert users were in India. So it was very hard to get everybody together in a room and sort of work through this all together. The actual requirements, I think, came through, we gathered them throughout the course of the week whenever we got opportunity with people, you know, sort of what do you need? And then we'd make a call at essentially just after the demo, because everybody would then tend to be together for that small amount of time, and we'd say, okay, we think we want to do this next. Does this fit in? And there was a time where we could have carried on features with this sort of image search engine, and actually we chose to pivot on to the actual image service that Ashley was talking about, because this that call was made then. So
there are 4 touch points for refining requirements, let's just say. So one of them is very much there may be more, actually. I'll list the ones I can think of. Let's see if it's 4 or 5. After the demo, we would say, okay, well, based on the system you've just seen, what seems to be the most important gap we need to fill? That was just setting a basic goal for the next week, and it maybe we say, okay, well, to achieve all of that, it'll take us a little bit longer than just the next sprint, but we'll start. So that sort of goal setting definitely happened after the demo, and we'd often come to the demo with a few options as to what exactly you might prefer, which is important, card views or fuzzy searches, and a call would be made by people who felt that it would affect them. We'd also have other catch-ups on deeper subjects as and when, so they will give us more food for thought or areas that we'd have to look into. We had our refinement on the Mondays, where we would try to look at the road ahead and pull candidate stories out, or pull details out that we knew would, working backwards from the goal, we would need to include in our work. And obviously on the planning, we'd be saying, well, hang on a minute, we're after the quiz, after the planning, we're going to be starting on these. So do we know enough to do this story? But one of the things we also did, given the size of these stories and given the team and empowerment and all of that, is we wouldn't prescribe things like the acceptance criteria inside the story unless it particularly came out of the conversation in refinement or planning. Part of the aim of taking a story off the board to work on is go and work out the finer detail of what this means to complete it. Go and collaborate with whoever is an expert, go and use your common sense, go and research it, or whatever it takes to work out the success criteria for this story, because it's small enough that that's not a big ask. And so there was a certain amount of just-in-time refinement baked into the stories themselves. And this is the idea of using experts to collaborate and research and complete things that are naturally very small. And that's a long way away from the kind of classic business analysis, user stories, acceptance criteria. There's lots of stuff that's not in that process that you would miss and that you might need in other contexts. But in this context, that maybe because it was more of a technical project, and maybe because there was a pre-existing system to tear down, that maybe is why it worked better for us in this case.
Okay, thank you, Ashley and Benjamin.
No problem. We also had some requirements came from a video of actually watching an expert user, watching this guy actually using the system and seeing how he used the system, the types of information he wanted this for. So that was our first sort of introduction to the actual use cases of the project. So our non-technical stories came from that session. I was watched his videos sort of many times over, trying to make sure we got this, and that's how he uses it, and that's what he wants, and that's what he puts in. So that was another avenue for getting some of the requirements as well. Okay. See, Sonu. We had a tagline for every demo that we coined at the start.
That's a good point. We forgot that in the so one thing which this very serious sounding presentation has hidden is the fact that we tried to inject a sense of fun into what we were doing. In that, we gave ourselves do you remember some of the catchphrases we used, like to the max or something? Yes, as well. Sure. Was one of them. And we using penguins as test data is not a serious thing to do, and yet everybody thought they were cute on the screen. And part of, I think, the spirit that makes our team function and that makes our stakeholders and collaborators feel generally more positive to us as we go forwards is we are trying to make this, you know, a friendly experience as well as making it a professional experience. And we're really keyed up to do a good job, but you should whistle while you work. And we try to inject, you know, some good-natured humor into what we're doing, and I think that you know, that helps, particularly when there's problems. If you've got a light touch, on the whole, you're going to come out of it happier than if everything's suddenly a drama because of the way you approach it. But I did open my mouth and upset people, so I have to learn a few lessons from that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think as a team, we just going to have and generally have a good laugh in most of our sessions. So even when they're a bit heavy, there's always somebody having a bit of a joke, and it's very human as well. We try to make the sessions very human, and even when we do a review, I mean, like very much like this meeting, we'll all get on and maybe they're a few minutes early, and then we're talking to the stakeholders and just swapping details. I mean, last time found out that our stakeholders has a small holding and keeps chickens or whatever, you know, had no idea. So there's a very human element to it, and if you can bring that out, then it just makes everything a lot easier, you know. Yeah. Okay.
So, any more? Well,
okay. I can't see you asked a question about 6 O's, and
I asked. Yeah, I just wondered whether you'd. I think you might have answered it in a way for me, but would you use it again? Would you keep using it?
I'll use that slide over again, but it's not a real thing. It's just it was just alliterative, and I'm a fan of that. So
no, I know. Yeah, but the approach, the kind of no estimates.
Yes, absolutely.
Approach.
Absolutely. It was. I think going through a bit of an evolution as a Scrum Master almost, and you go through and you learn everything, and then you learn all these tools and techniques, and it's all great and fantastic, and you feel you've got to do everything, and then being in lockdown has been a bit liberating because you have to pare back with so much, and the focus goes on different things. And for me, this was real. Right, let's just go back to basics, start from the very beginning. What we're trying to do, you know, and it's more important now to follow. I know it's definitely probably doing the wrong things, but it's probably, you know, it's more important that I stick to the Agile values as opposed to implement Scrum in its fullness. It's nice to be able to, you know, marry those up. I borrowed heavily from, you know, we borrow heavily from Scrum and other things, but what we do isn't Scrum. You know, clearly isn't Scrum, but we just learn from it, and it's, yeah, I wouldn't have to do. I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing estimates unless we had to, or like Ashley said, if you're portfolio planning and there's lots of big projects and you know, people are trying to schedule things, that might be a time to use some estimates. But this, you know, this wasn't the case for it. I think we'd estimated anything, we'd have given the product manager the wrong impression that we knew too much. You know, we'd have, you know, and we didn't know anything at all. So it's safer not to give an estimate, I think, in that scenario.
I think the thing which is, your process can stop people getting the job done, and your checklists can stop people finding the real thing they need to do. And that doesn't mean there's not value in processes and checklists. But one of the things that you've got to dance on this line between just make it so and stop because this isn't the story that does that. So imagine an example where you're in a stand-up meeting and someone has a fact they want to impart, and the rules of the stand-up is don't go into the detail, do that later. But sometimes you do let them impart that fact, and you do have that quick momentary side conversation because the moment requires it, and it's a good thing to do. And so the same applies with stories as well, both in terms of how you play a story. So a good example, right at the moment we've got to do some soap testing on something we're doing. And if some issue comes up, the default is not, oh, let's defer that to a story because we're just doing some soap testing. If some crap happens and you can see how to fix it, you just fix it, because it's not worth the overhead of preventing yourself from achieving the actual goal by deferring it to a story or using the process against making things happen. But if something big happens whilst we're doing this thing and some big side distraction, then clearly it's off mission and we should defer it to a story. So you have to make that constant adjustment of the line. And then similarly, the story that you define. Is the story of soak testing really a story that says report on the system under soak test? Because if it is, then you should do nothing except stay in your box. And actually our methodology, because we don't really have exclusive testers and we don't have people who are business analysts and whatever else, most of our stories are about making some positive change to the real world. So it's not go and test that. It's actually, whilst testing it, go and make that work. Go and make that good enough. Or in some very rare cases, go and find out whether we need to make that good enough. But fundamentally, that's still a step forward in the project. So it's all about, again, setting goals that are about achieving something and letting people actually get them done, and only pulling them back from the brink if they're about to go on a massive side quest that clearly is beyond what the goal was about. And I think that constantly keeping ourselves honest in that has been part of the secret to a lot of that success. And that's kind of baked into the 6 O's, or was it 7 O's? Spaghetti O's, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's baked into that because you set yourself an achievable goal that's all about delivering value, not about, I mean, it may have the shape of a task, but fundamentally it's a task that is got to achieve something. I love that silence after a long explanation.
Yeah, it's just processing.
Yeah.
This is the bad demo all over again.
Okay, so it's good. Maylee said, love making it human, adding fun, penguins, etc. And the great demo. I'm going to use Whistle While You Work. Thank you.
You have to pay royalties to Walt Disney, but you should definitely do it.
So I think on that basis, have you guys got anything else to add, or has anyone got any other questions? Otherwise, I think we'll say thank you very much and wrap it up, I would say.
Like in that meeting with the TPM, I think I've said enough.
Probably have. Well, look, guys, that was really interesting. Thanks very much for coming and sharing. I wasn't actually sure what to expect there, and it was some really interesting insights. And yeah, I'm really it did sound like a real kind of trap at the beginning, and you pulled through and delivered something and made everyone happy. So well done. Congratulations for doing so. And thanks for coming and talking to us. And Ashley, thanks for coming back again to Agile and Elsevier the evening. So good to have you back briefly. And as I said, everyone, the next one, if we've got content, is going to be the 13th of April. And again, it's sort of, apart from next month, because the Monday is a bank holiday Monday in the UK, it's normally about the second Tuesday of the month. If anyone has something they'd like to talk about, please come forward. It doesn't have to be a full-blown workshop. Looking to organise maybe a set of lightning talks soon. So if anyone's got anything short, 5 to 15 minutes, then also get in touch. And guys, you're both welcome back if you once you've either been successful or completely failed your next project.
It will be one or the other.
Yeah. So I'm going to good.